Hello to everyone that's trickling in early. We do start right at 11. So just hang tight. We have a lot of people usually trickle in right on the dot. So I like to just get everything prepped ahead of time. So thanks for being here early. Just hang tight. We got a good show for you. All righty. Well, we are hitting 11 on the dot. So I am going to get started. Let me make sure I'm not muted. That's always fun. Hey, so we do have a chat box here. So if questions do come up, feel free to throw them into the chat box. Otherwise, of course, I'm always very easy to get a hold of after the fact. I just want to make sure attendees can chat with everyone I'll put it, attendees can chat with hosts and panelists. So yeah, if you have a question, just pop it in there. It'll come to me directly and other people shouldn't be able to see your name. Otherwise, like I said, just contact me after we go through our content today. But I want to get started, want to make sure I'm respectful of everybody's time. Thank you all so much for signing up for our Planning for Retirement webinar. This is a part of our ongoing financial wellness series that we've been doing coming up maybe on a year and a half now. We've received really, really, really good feedback from folks that have attended past sessions. We're trying to cover a lot of different topics that we're just seeing as very important to people, regardless of their walk of life. You know, we've been chatting with people who are, just graduating college, trying to figure out how to manage their college debt, and of course, how to save for the future. We're meeting with people, who are mid-career, transitioning, having kids, buying, selling homes. And of course, we're meeting with people who are nearing retirement. A lot of these people, they've got different concerns, different issues, but there's some major things that we see predominantly within the space of personal finance. So that's why we kind of put together these presentations for you guys, why your employers allow us to continue to do them. So today we're going to be talking all about planning for retirement. All right. Oh, usually the first one gets me. All right, so who am I? My name is Lucas Amel. If you've never been to one of these before, thank you so much for signing up. I've been in the industry now practicing for 8 years. I graduated with a degree in finance from a college over in Waukesha, Wisconsin called Carroll University. I've had extensive experience, especially for somebody my age, running a multi-million-dollar company as the director of operations, being a tax advisor. I've prepared 400 plus tax returns, working in estate planning, setting up wills, trusts, powers of attorney for folks. What I like to say is just the amount of exposure and experience that I've had at this point. I've seen most of what can go wrong for folks, and of course, what can go right for folks. And that's why I'm such an advocate of being proactive when it comes to your financial situation. My why is basically what I just said. I've seen what happens when people are reactive, not having beneficiaries on accounts, not having money in a Roth, and then all of a sudden their retirement's a tax time bomb, not planning for kids' education, not saving efficiently for a home or buying a home they can't afford. My why is really why I get out of bed. It's just that people need to know this kind of stuff. They need guidance when it comes to personal finance, putting what, where, and who. It's really important. And if you don't breathe in this space like me and my team does, there's a lot of stuff that you just don't know that you don't know, right? And that's why we host these workshops at no cost for, our member organizations like Advocate, Optum, Kohler, Children's. There's a couple other ones. Is the stuff's important and it applies to everybody, no matter how old you are, no matter how much money you make. So when it comes to an organizational structure, I am an agent of Mass Mutual. They're kind of like a cousin company to Northwestern. Most people know them because they're really headquartered in the Midwest. Mass Mutual is headquartered on the East Coast, but that's kind of where I hang my licenses, although I am an independent financial planner fiduciary. We have an agency here. It's called West Point Financial Group. We're one of the largest financial service firms within the Midwest, with over 450 advisors spanning between, Wisconsin, Illinois, Michigan, Indiana, and Ohio. And then I am a managing partner of the Lettenberger Financial Group. There's two other partners. Between the three of us now, we're, pushing closer to $250 million of assets under management. When it comes to areas of focus, as I said, I've done taxes, financial planning, investment management, estate planning, insurance, college. The list goes on and on. Like I said, I've seen it all. That's why I feel that I'm qualified to talk about it. But who I'm not, before we jump into the meat and potatoes, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a CPA. Everything that we're going to be covering today, of course, is informational. It should not be taken as direct advice. If you do need direct advice for your specific situation, seek out a trusted advisor that can speak to you on those regards. So, going back to it, and we're kind of looking at, okay, well, what is this concept of financial well-being, this main, archetype that we've been talking about for all the different webinars that we do? It's got four main pillars, and this is how we start every one. So sorry if this is redundant to anybody that's come to the past ones, but these things are extremely important, okay? First and foremost, having control over our month-to-month or day-to-day finances. This really just boils down to having a budget and somewhat sticking to it. Now, I know that sometimes having a budget can have a negative connotation, meaning that, you're being tight with your money, etc. Realistically, it's not. The big thing about when it comes to budgeting is just having an understanding of what your household's cash flow is. Understanding, okay, here's what's coming in, Here's what's going out, what's left, or where's it going. It's just important to understand the cash flow situation in your household so you can make sure that, if you're saving for retirement, you're saving in the right places and enough. If you're saving for college or a home, same thing. Or just to really understand your expenses. So I've gone through budgets with people and they didn't realize that they were paying hundreds of dollars for subscriptions that they don't even use anymore, or the faded gym membership that you applied for 5 years ago that you haven't gone to. It's important to understand what's coming into your household, what's going out, and where it's going. A lot of people don't have a defined budget that they stick to. If that's something that's important to you, we have a budget organizer that we can just send you for free, just so you can kind of start plugging and playing with the numbers yourself. It's not something to take, to say one more thing about budgeting. It's not something that necessarily is developed in a day or a week or even a month. Sometimes you need to see the cycle of your spending, keep track of it over the course of 2, 3, 4 months to kind of get averages on how much you spend on gas, how much you spend on groceries, electricity, et cetera, because they're going to fluctuate a little bit. But like I said, have an understanding of what's coming in, what's going out, and of course, where it's going. Second cornerstone of financial well-being, having the capacity to absorb financial shock. Now, this is a huge one. Basically, this is saying having an emergency fund or, a rainy day fund. That number is different for everybody. There is a rule of thumb that typically says, you want an emergency fund that's maybe 3 to 5 months of your salary. Now, 5 might be on the higher end, but truthfully, some people are just more comfortable with it. I met with a family last night, clients of mine, and their comfort level's 25 grand. That's more than 5 months of their salary, but that's what they're comfortable with, and that's what they strive for. So it's different for everybody, but typically if you could shoot for that 3 to 5 month range, it's going to put you in a good spot. Thirdly, being on track to meet financial goals. The first step of this is having financial goals, right? It's really having an understanding of, okay, I'm earning this money, but what am I doing with it? Spending is a component. Sometimes you want to save for a trip. I'm going to Hawaii in 2 months. I set a financial goal to save X amount, so it's not this big upset on my budget. See how I'm circling back to number 1? So, having financial goals is important. When are you going to retire? How much money do you need on a month-to-month basis? Are you sending your kids to school? How much do you want to help with that? Are you saving for a first home, second home, vacation home? What kind of down payment do you want to make? And then, of course, with the money that you're saving, where are you putting it? How is it invested? And how is it going to be taxed when you actually need access to it? It's important to have goals, big goals, so you can start winding it back and understanding, okay, how do I get to that goal and what facets make up that goal in and of itself? And then lastly, having the freedom just to make the choices that allow you to live the life that you want. This is realistically just kind of encompassing the other 3 cornerstones. When you have a budget in place, when you have an emergency fund, when you have goals and you're on track to accomplish them or within reason to accomplish them, finances really lose a lot of stress. I was just meeting with a girl yesterday who she recently graduated college. She needs to start paying back her loans, and she started crying. Or at least she was in tears when I started talking to her, because she didn't realize how much she had to pay in loans and how much over the course of the loan, because they were set to 20-year payback, because that's what fit her budget, how much she actually had to pay. I think the loan that she was looking at was $30,000, but over the course of 20 years, it was going to cost her $80,000. So going back to what I said, that this gives you a lot more peace of mind when you have a budget and an understanding and a goal around it. What we were able to do is refinance the loan that she had to a lower interest rate that was more affordable and under the same time repayment. It ended up saving her like $12,000 over the course of the loan, and it cost her nothing. Realistically, I made nothing, but she was already an insurance client of mine. So, that's just what I mean, is having an understanding of these various components of financial well-being. She instantly said that felt like 10,000-pound weight lifted off my shoulders, because yeah, I'm still paying, and yeah, it's still expensive on a month to month, but at least now I know why, and I know when it's going to be done, and I know I'm doing it efficiently. And that's what this is all about. Okay. So like I said, sorry if that was redundant, but those things are all extremely important. We wouldn't be doing these workshops, and we wouldn't have it in every slide if they weren't important. So to kind of jump into the meat and potatoes of today's session, we're, like I said, we're going to be talking retirement. All right. So the agenda for today, envisioning our retirement. What do we want this to look like? Where are you going to live? What are you going to do? How much money do you want to spend? We'll talk a little more about it. Building your retirement strategy. So this is going to kind of look at both, okay, well, what are we doing before retirement to lead us up to that point? But then once you're in retirement, okay, well, how are we drawing income? How are we feeling confident, kind of going back to that fourth cornerstone? How do we feel confident that our budget, our emergency fund, and our goals are all on track, so we don't need to be staying up at night saying, oh boy, I hope I can afford groceries next month? So having a strategy is hugely important. Part of that strategy is going to be looking at various sources of retirement income. Okay, so there's a lot, from 401ks to pensions to annuities to IRAs to Roths, and bears, lions, tigers, oh my. We're going to kind of talk about the different ones, the pros and cons of each one. A lot of people usually have an amalgam of different retirement accounts to draw income from, and it's important to know what they do, the pros and the cons, and the whys. Okay, building your nest egg. This is for the folks that are still, pre-retirement, which the majority of you, I think, would be, because you're all still employed. So, we're going to talk about various ways to build a nest egg in terms of investing, how, risky investments should be, the different types of investments that are out there, and of course, the various vehicles to save. And then lastly, just some other retirement risks that we should be considering and kind of baking into our strategy from a risk management standpoint and kind of a contingency planning standpoint. All right. So envisioning our retirement. This is kind of our first little bit here. And like I said, what do we want retirement to look like? And this is going to be different for everybody. Where do we want to live? How long do we kind of envision a retirement? Do you want to be going on a trip every year, 2 trips every year, 3? I don't know. Traveling with your kids. Do a lot of people like to be doing gifting during retirement towards their kids and their grandkids? It's important to start really visualizing, okay, well, what do I want this to look like? Then, of course, when do I want to actually pull that trigger? And I know, you might say it, like, especially if it's over a decade away, like, oh, I want to retire at 63. And then I have a lot of people who have said that for the past decade, get to 63, and then they're kind of too scared to do it, because it is a scary thing. You're turning off your paycheck, and all of a sudden you need to replace that paycheck from your assets. And if you don't have a plan, that's an extremely, extremely daunting thing. But remember, our fourth cornerstone is saying, hey, if you have a plan, you can kind of relax. You can feel better. There's peace of mind and ease of mind. So, thinking, okay, when do we want to retire? And if I'm retiring at this age, realistically, how long might that last me? And that, nobody has a crystal ball. My job would be a lot easier if I knew when people were going to pass away, because then we could just spend all their money. but you really don't. So, look at how long did your parents live? What kind of health issues do you have? I know sometimes it sounds a little morbid, but realistically, if you're planning how to spend down the rest of your money, it's important to kind of have an understanding. You don't want to live too frugal, but you don't want to overspend. And then, of course, what sources of income are there going to be? Where is it coming from? And one thing that's often overlooked when it comes to retirement planning is how is that going to be taxed? And we'll talk a little more about that too. So getting more specific when it comes to envisioning retirement, a lot of this I've already mentioned, but where are you going to live? Some people like to buy a new property. Some people like to sell their home here, move to somewhere warmer if you're living in the Midwest. Some people I've worked with have sold their homes altogether and bought an RV and traveled the country. Everybody's got different goals, different prerogatives, different lives and flavors that they want when it comes to retirement. So it's important that you start visualizing and conceptualizing what you want this to mean to you. It's a personal journey when you're looking at retirement. Okay. And then this one, the second one is extremely overlooked. How are you going to spend your time? When it comes to retirement, a lot of people don't realize that all of a sudden they're going to have an extra 8, 9, 10 hours to their day every day, at least 5 days a week. When you're working, a big part of your identity comes from your job. It gives you an element of socialization. It gives you a reason to leave the house, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when you turn off that switch and all of a sudden you're no longer working, okay, well, how are you socializing? What are you leaving the house for? I had a lot of people retire, and then the next time I got back together with them, talking to them and saying, okay, well, how's retirement going? They're saying, oh, I got a new job. Like, wait, what? You didn't need money. And they're like, yeah, but I was so bored. So, it's important to have an understanding. So whether it means hobbies, like adding new hobbies or starting to pursue hobbies more. Another one too is just volunteering. I serve on 2 separate boards of directors for a nature center and a chamber of commerce. The majority of the people that at least dedicate a lot of time to those organizations, they are retired. They're looking for something to do. They're looking for meaningful work. They don't care if they get paid. They just want to belong to a community, feel valued, have a reason to leave the house, and continue to socialize with other people in a professional or semi-professional setting. So it's important to think. And then lastly, I already mentioned it, how long will your retirement last? Nobody's got a crystal ball, but there's a big difference between, a 20-year retirement and a 40-year retirement. I have seen both. So it's important to have some kind of understanding or at least idea of what that looks like. All right, so when we're kind of looking at retirement, typically we see it as kind of 3 phases. Now, they don't always last evenly 10 years, but this is kind of typically the path that we see as, financial practitioners, is this idea or this concept of your go-go years, your slow-go years, and your no-go years. So, typically in the first, let's just call it 8 to 12 years, you're doing all the stuff that you always said you were going to do. You and your spouse take that 3-week cruise around the world, and you finally take the grandkids to Disney World, and you do this, and you always wanted to do that, and you always wanted to do that. You'd be surprised how fast people check off their bucket lists. Typically it's done within 10 years. So, they pursued those hobbies, they went on those trips that they wanted to go to, and then it's like, oh, okay. Well, then, the second phase of retirement that we kind of see, that slow go years, is realistically it's just kind of settling in. You settle into retirement, you get used to your routine. Every Thursday I go play sheep's head here, and every Wednesday I go volunteer at the library, and blah 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 blah, like whatever it turns into for you. And then thirdly, of course, is these are your no-go years. You're really not choosing to travel or unfortunately able to travel anymore. It kind of turns into spending time with family, maintaining the routines. But it's just important that you kind of start to think about this is how retirement goes. Unfortunately, you're not going to be extremely vibrantly youthful when you're 90 and want to climb Mount Everest. It's just the reality of it. But it's important to conceptualize that when you're thinking of a strategy, okay? So when it comes to building a strategy, here's the three main types of assets that you can have in your portfolio, okay? So there's growth assets. These, of course, as the name says, these are meant to continue growing. So this can be your 401ks, your IRAs, your annuities, sometimes. And then access. This is money that is liquid. So it can be, checking savings and ultimately your 401ks. Because once you turn 59 and a half, you have access without penalty to pretty much any type of account, okay? And then predictable income. So this can be income annuities, pension, which is also an income annuity, Social Security. And then there's kind of a little bit, but yeah, like I said, so growth, these are the assets that you want to continue growing. When you get to retirement, you don't all of a sudden pull the plug on your 401k and say, hey, I want this to go all cash. You still want to be invested. You still want to be participating in the money or in the market. However, the way that a retiree invests is typically different than the way you invest when you're still in your working years. Because you got to think, a retiree can't keep throwing money into their 401k. They're retired. They need to transition from what's known as an accumulation stage to what's known as a distribution stage. And people who are in distribution typically have largely different investment strategies. Like I said, the access funds, these you can access very readily without, of course, disrupting your overall plan. So this can be like checking savings, certificates of deposit, certain bonds, and then predictable income. This is stuff, and we'll cover this in a soon approaching slide, but this is stuff like Social Security, pensions. All right. So when it comes to, like I said, building a budget, it's important that you have a budget pre-retirement. But one thing that we found is extremely, extremely helpful for folks is building a budget for retirement. And based on, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, as we see an average of what retirees spend their money on, it's this. About 35% of their income is going towards housing. So a surprising amount of people, truthfully, carry a mortgage into retirement. It's a conversation that I would say I have with a lot with folks, is whether or not they should be paying off their mortgage before they retire. Ultimately, it depends on what your situation is. But truthfully, a lot of folks carry their mortgage into retirement. Then, of course, this is taking into consideration, no matter what, you have to pay property taxes. A lot of people, when they get to retirement, they might even sell a home and downsize to like a condo or like a luxury apartment or like a senior living home. So that's kind of where we're seeing these numbers. Food, 13%. Transportation, so whether usually it's, purchasing a vehicle at some point in retirement. We see a lot of folks within retirement driving with leases or, still carrying a balance on a auto loan. Entertainment, surprisingly, is the lowest one. So this can actually include travel. This can be going to the movies. This can be just activities with kids, grandkids, or, your spouse. Utilities, of course, not broken into housing. Healthcare is a big one. And I would say this is truthfully is understated. I think this is because it's averaging between 65 and older. If we looked at these numbers for somebody 70 and older, I think healthcare would be at a minimum number 2. Definitely creeping more closer to the housing, but we'll talk about that later. So, like I said, it's important to understand what the various costs of retirement are, and then start to build this into your strategy. Saying, okay, well, if I'm on a 20-year mortgage, but I want to retire in 10 years, well, that means 10 years of my retirement, I'm still going to be paying housing. Same with transportation, if you're carrying an auto loan, et cetera, et cetera. So it's important to start conceptualizing what these things look like, and of course, how they're going to apply to you and your household. All right, sources of income. So this is important, and this is where people start getting confused, because this is realistically the more complicated part of retirement planning, right? Replacing that paycheck with the stuff that you've been saving your whole life to accumulate, okay? So we've got 401ks. Pretty much everybody on this call should have a 401k, participate in it at a minimum, take advantage of the employer match, right? Most 401ks, I'll be quick with this, they do actually have what's known as a Roth 401k option. Look into that with HR or on your 401k website. It's a really, really good strategy to employ. I mean, your employer is still going to match you into the pre-tax, but the more money that you get in that Roth earlier, when you actually want it in retirement, it comes to you totally tax-free. We're a huge fan of the Roth 401k or IRA, especially under the current tax code. Social Security, a lot of people, especially people in like their 30s and 40s, they usually kind of roll their eyes when I mention it. A lot of folks don't think it's going to be around. Based on most of the commentary that I follow, it should be around for a very long time. There are projected to be cutbacks in it, though. So the way that it's working for folks right now is definitely not the way that it's going to work for folks in their 30s and 40s. But for them to completely eliminate the Social Security system, it would really cause an upheaval, especially right now. For the majority of retirees, they're largely dependent on it. So there's going to be some work there, but for now, and for the purposes of this presentation, just think of Social Security is going to be a source of retirement income. Pensions, very few people get them anymore. If you do have a pension, consider yourself pretty blessed. I mean, it is a very viable source of income. Any source of income that's guaranteed for your lifetime is tremendous. So when we're looking at Social Security, pensions, and annuities, which is synonymous with a pension, those are really good for your strategy. Rental income, it's less common, having duplexes or single family properties that you rent out. I don't see it as often, but there are some people that do it as a strategy. I've even seen people buy rental properties right before going into retirement as a retirement strategy. It can be out there. IRAs, of course, it's similar to a 401k, just one that you can kind of self-direct or work on with an advisor. Kind of same thing. It's an investment account. And then income from hobbies. This is one thing that I see a lot of retirees doing, is kind of picking up a hobby or part-time work during retirement. I've seen people do photography or selling something at like farmers markets or craft fairs. Hey, income's income, money's money. So going back to it, it's important that we're crafting this into our retirement strategy. So far, we've talked budgeting, so our expenses, and income. So how are we meeting our budget with our income? Where are we drawing those things from? This is kind of that same study that looked at, okay, well, what are the most common places that individuals 65 and older are getting their retirement income from? A surprising amount of people over 65, which is 33%, are still getting it from wages. So a lot of people are working past 65. There's nothing wrong with it. There's nothing right about it. Once again, if that's what your strategy necessitates or how you choose to develop it, it is what it is. 47% of most people's income in retirement is Social Security. So going back to what I was saying, do I think it's going to be around forever? It's going to change, but right now, most people depend on it for almost half of their retirement. Now, this is in average, so it's not everything. Then, of course, about 8% is looking at interest and dividends. So this is stuff that's kind of spitting off your investment accounts, every year or every quarter, whatever that looks like. A lot of people can choose to use that, to help supplement their lifestyle. Self-employment, this is kind of what I was saying before, going back to, doing like hobbies, craft fairs, farmers markets. A lot of people too, you've been working in some kind of profession for 20, 30 years. You have a specialty at this point. A lot of individuals, once they transition to retirement, they pick up like consulting jobs. So say you're in IT for 25 years or project management, hey, you don't need a full-time job, but can you consult an ongoing project as a ad hoc project manager for 5-10 hours a week? I see that a lot. And surprisingly, they pay very well when you do those consulting type stuff. This is just stuff, like I mentioned before, like rental income. It's not, you don't see it as much, but it is still something that people do. So if you can take nothing away from the presentation, take this, or anything away from the presentation. Please don't take nothing away. Screenshot this if you need to. So this is the big one. So this is kind of a strategy that I would say is a rule of thumb when it comes to creating a retirement plan, and it's known as the 4-box strategy. So this helps people manage their expenses, lining up, predictable expenses with predictable income, unpredictable expenses with unpredictable income. Okay. So when we're looking at it over here, kind of looking at our blue box saying, okay, well, we've got predictable income. We've got Social Security, we've got pensions, we've got income annuities. Remember what I said? It's really good when it comes to having a plan to have income that is going to last you and potentially your spouse's entire lifetime. So what do we do with this income that we know is going to be fixed and it's not going to go away and it's going to be there forever? Well, that's what we look at to meet our necessary expenses, okay? And that's a roof over your head, food on the table. You can make sure that you pay all your doctor's bills. You can make sure that you have clothes on your back, right? The bare necessities, making sure that, hey, here's our fixed income we know is never going to go away. Let's make sure that our lifestyle is completely met by that fixed amount. Then, you don't have to do it that way, but let me tell you, if you know without a shadow of a doubt that your basic needs are met for your entire retirement, no matter what, and then you got other stuff to play with, your peace of mind is just going to be there. It's going to be incredibly better than a person that's trying to pull a slot machine to pay for their groceries, right? So going back to it, then our orange is income from assets. So this is kind of like what we were talking about before, our 401ks, our investment money, our stock money, our bond money, whatever it is, all that stuff fluctuates. It can be unpredictable. So that's kind of where we say, hey, if we use our predictable money to pay our predictable and necessary expenses, and then our unpredictable money to pay for stuff like travel, for hobbies, for the superfluous stuff, but the stuff that makes your life a lot more fun, right? So that's kind of how they look at this 4-box strategy. A lot of people employ this and are very successful with it. And like I said, it just gives you peace of mind knowing, hey, my bare minimum, no matter what, is covered for my lifetime. Everything above and beyond that, it's kind of like bonus money. So how do you spend it? You should still be responsible about it. You should still have a plan for it. All right, so building our nest egg, I promised we'd talk about this. A lot of folks don't understand this concept, and it's this concept of risk tolerance. So typically what they say as a rule of thumb, the younger you are, the further away from retirement that you are, you should be more and more aggressive, okay? You should have more stock and or equity holdings in your portfolio. Now, the closer you get to retirement, you should be, in theory, tapering off your risk. So having more bonds or bond alternatives and or cash in the portfolio. Because when you're retired, you don't want your investment account to be a crazy roller coaster. You want it to be less volatile, we call it. Meaning that, if the market dips down 20%, hopefully yours only went down 3 to 5. But if the market goes up 20%, yours is probably only going up 3 to 5. You want more predictability the closer that you get to retirement. Now, there's ways to kind of cheat this a little. You know, a lot of folks in retirement, they'll have a couple buckets, what we call, of, you know, varying risk investments. So they'll have a bucket that's very conservative. They'll have a bucket that's kind of in the middle, and then they'll have a bucket that's very aggressive. Hey, when the aggressive one's doing well, that thing's ripping really good. And, you know, going back to my example, it went up 20%. Well, going back to our 4-box example, well, that bucket, the 20% up bucket, is where we're going to pull our orange stuff for our yellow stuff. But going back to it, well, now that aggressive bucket is down 20%. Well, let's leave that one alone and tap into the one that's only down 3 to 5 for our orange stuff. So there's a lot of different strategies when it comes to this, but as a rule of thumb, when you're younger, you should be more stock oriented. When you're older, you should be more bond oriented. So a lot of folks will ask me, let me take a sip. I'm drinking a lot or talking a lot. So a lot of folks will ask, okay, well, how much do I need saved to retire? I've heard, you know, I've been around the block a couple times. I've been in the industry for a while. I've heard a lot of different things, from 10 times your annual salary to 25 times your annual salary. One thing that we've kind of seen as a good rule of thumb for folks is 15. Okay, and let me show you why 15 is the good kind of nest egg to shoot for. So with 15% of your annual income saved, assuming you can get on average a 5% rate of return on that when you retire, that should be, in theory, based on the math and the way that it plays out, replacing about 75% of what your pre-retirement income was. So that has nothing to do with Social Security, pensions, annuities. It's just saying, hey, if you built up a nest egg this big and it's kind of growing about 5% every year, the 5% a year that it's kicking off should replace about 75% of your old income. And then for you to replace more of it, you just pull more out of the account. It's just, we found that the 15 times multiple puts people at a very safe, ease of mind position when looking at retirement. All right, and then I think this is the last section here, is the various risks to consider when you're approaching retirement, when you're planning for it, and when you're putting together a retirement strategy. First of all, longevity. Second, we've got inflation, healthcare, asset allocation, and withdrawals. So we're going to jump into each one of these individually. So longevity. This is going to be a growing, I don't want to say problem, but the reality of it is, with the advances in medical technology, you know, people are living longer and longer. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just important that we have an understanding of that so we can say, okay, well, you know, going back to what I said before, how long of a retirement are we planning for? You know, if you're going to be retiring at 60, are you going to be living to 80? Are you going to be living to 90? Are you going to be living to 100? It's really like, I mean, you can't tell. You can go off of the average mortality rate for your gender, and, you know, that's at least a good starting point. And that's usually what I tell people. But, you know, longevity does run in the family too. So, you know, if both of your parents lived to their mid-upper 90s, the probability that you're going to do that too, unless you start chain smoking or skydiving or both at the same time, you know, the probability that you're going to be there too is very high. So it's one thing to consider when planning for retirement is, you know, not planning to maybe live to 80, maybe planning to live to 90. I usually make all my plans to age 100. Because that's just what I feel better doing, unless somebody straight up tells me there's no way I'm living past 85, you know, but it's important to plan for longevity. Next, inflation. This is a huge one. I think it's become more and more prevalent for folks, especially over the past year or two, when we're seeing, 6, 7, 8% inflation rates. Now, that's not normal. Normally, I think the average is like 2.3, something like that. But just realistically, if we're thinking down the road, $2 today could be worth $1.33 in 20 years. I mean, that's a goofy example. We could have based it off one, but whatever. We're never going to really see deflation. We've never seen that in the history of our country, I don't think. What you can buy with $1 today, I mean, go to the grocery store and go shopping. It's significantly different than what it was 10 years ago. It's even more different than what it was 20 years ago. You hear it all the time from, old timers saying, back in my day, when I wanted to fill up my gas tank, I just gave the guy a nickel. Well, last time I filled up, I think it was like $50. 20 years from now, it's not going to be any better. It's just money keeps getting printed. Our dollar keeps being worth less. So it's important for you to factor into that when you're saying, hey, I spend $400 on groceries today. Well, 20 years from now, that might be $600. So inflation's a huge consideration when you're planning for retirement. That's why you usually do want to work with a financial planner, because their fancy pants software just automatically takes into account inflation. It's a lot better than just a calculator at home, right? Healthcare. This is a huge one. I mean, not everybody has a home health aide, but it's just an example because, a lot of people say, I talk to a lot of people about long-term care stuff like, hey, if I ever had to go to a nursing home, I'd rather have a nurse come to my house. Well, on average, that costs about $55,000 a year. And that's more just the nurse, nothing to do with additional medical expenses that are coming with that. That can drain any nest egg very, very quickly. So a lot more people are looking towards insurance or long-term care products that can help kind of cover this contingency for their future. We do a lot of long-term care planning in our office because it's a huge, huge risk. I've seen $1 million estates bled dry because somebody had to go to a nursing home. Asset allocation, this is a huge one. I mean, we kind of already touched on it, but it doesn't mean that it will go away. It'll never go away. How you're invested during retirement can be one of your biggest risks based on market volatility. If you start retirement with $1 million and you're feeling all good, and then all of a sudden we get a COVID 2.0 and it goes down 35%, that can drastically change your retirement plans, especially if you need money from those accounts. But at the same time too, you don't just want to park all your money in cash, because then, going back to our last or two ago risk, you're not beating inflation. Your money's just decaying. So you got to play this game of, okay, well, I need to be in the market, but I don't want to lose all my money, but I want to gain money so I'm not losing all my money to inflation. There's a game you got to play, especially too, it becomes more complicated when you're taking money from those accounts. Then, of course, investing for longevity. So it's kind of combining all the different ones. But lastly is withdrawals. Like I was saying, this whole investing game for folks changes when you're taking money out of the accounts. Okay, so when you're in distribution mode, that's when it really makes a difference. That's why I said a lot of folks use that bucketed strategy that I mentioned before, because if all your money is invested one way and the market doesn't agree with that way, and you need to keep drawing money from that account, not only are you losing money in the market, but you're also you're putting it, in a sense, taking it away so it never gets a chance to recover. So that's why retirement investing is drastically different than accumulation or investing while you're still working. So it requires substantially more planning. So that's kind of the meat and potatoes that we got through here. But as a review, envision what this looks like. Remember, where are you going to live? What are you going to do? What kind of lifestyle do you want? Estimating a retirement budget. Realistically, how much do you need on a month-to-month basis, adjusted for inflation? I usually tell people just in today's dollars, what do you need for housing, food, that circle that we talked about, the various things that you need. Okay, well, now we identified what we need. Well, how are we going to do it? And is it tax efficient and optimized? So looking at our various sources of income, then of course, going back to those risk factors that we looked at and just making sure, hey, do I have a contingency for this? Or how exposed to this risk am I or me and my spouse? And, one other thing that's worth mentioning, a big part of your financial well-being is truthfully physical well-being. So we put it in here just to encourage people, stay active, continue reading, continue exercising. One of the quickest ways to make your retirement miserable is never leaving your house and just sitting there in front of the TV. I'm just saying. And then leaving a legacy. So this kind of goes a little more towards estate planning than retirement planning, but sometimes a big part of somebody's retirement strategy is making sure that they're allowed to, help out their kids or their grandkids, or leave behind money to their kids, grandkids, charities or causes that they support. So it's one thing that is important to kind of take into consideration. So I do see that I have one question, so I'll address that, but at the same time too, I'll wrap up as well for the people that do want to get out of here. Here's all my contact info. Me and my team are available here as a resource for everybody that signs up for these webinars. I usually have my guy Jorge go and give everybody a call, see if they want to just do a 15-20-minute quick check-in with myself and or one of my business partners. Just see, hey, what's going on? What kind of questions do you have? Is there anything that we can do to help you out, move you along on your journey here? There's no cost to those kind of consultations, so I really implore you to take advantage of them. We've had a lot of very constructive conversations with folks based on, taking advantages of the check-ins. So I do have some questions here, so I'll read through those. Have you had clients that have a spouse that doesn't have anything set up? And can your plan cover for 2 people or more? Yes, I have had a lot of clients like that, whether it was, I've had clients who were married to an immigrant that either worked very part-time or didn't have a 401k. I've had clients that, unfortunately, their spouse was disabled and not able to work. Realistically, I have a lot of clients who their spouse is a stay-at-home husband or wife too. You can't double dip in a 401k for 2 people, but I mean, you can develop a plan for 2 people to live off of, if that makes sense. I don't know if that directly addresses what your question was, but I kind of think it does. Have anything set up, and can your plan cover for 2 people? I guess, okay, thank you. And then mentioned in our last sentence, what percentage to contribute to get matched from an employer? What percentage was that? So the employer match, it's going to be different per company that you work at. So typically it's like 3 to 4%. Like I know we've got a lot of folks from Advocate Aurora on this call. Their employer match is 3%. It should be very easy for you to find, but like I recommend at a minimum, and no matter what your financial situation is, and I guess I can't say this directly as advice, but as a really big rule of thumb, when it comes to it, with the 401k matching, at a minimum, you should be taking advantage of your match. There's no other place that you can put $1 that it automatically turns into another $1. That's a 100% rate of return guaranteed. If you put it there, it's a no-brainer. Can you transfer? Hold on, now I'm popular today. Can you transfer a 401k into a Roth 401k? That's actually a really good question. So sorry, I kind of mumbled that. The question was, can you transfer a 401k into a Roth 401k? The answer is a little ambiguous, so it depends. So no matter what, if the money is in a 401k, that means that the money is already pre-tax. If you do have a Roth 401k option, you would have to check with your plan sponsor because you would have to do what's known as a 401k conversion. So if money's in pre-tax and you want it to be in the Roth, you have to pay taxes on it. Okay, no matter what, there's no other, you can't just move it into a Roth because you like what a Roth is. If it's pre-tax and you want it in a Roth, you have to pay taxes on it. So say you have $100,000 in, pre-tax 401k, and all of a sudden you want that 100,000 in a Roth 401k. Well, you have to pay taxes on that 100,000, and that's going to be taxed at your income rate. So typically, let's just call it 22%. And, if you live in the state of Wisconsin, Wisconsin takes 6%. So they kind of chew a lot out of it. So, short answer, you can. Long answer, it's not always advisable because it's a big, big tax bill. However, I'm doing a lot of conversions with folks right now just because our tax code is going to be changing come 2025. We're going to be reverting back to what was before what's known as the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. Donald Trump passed it when he became president. So no matter what, we know it for certainty, taxes are going up at a minimum back to what they used to be. Most likely they're going to be going higher based on where we are from a national budget standpoint. None of that's a political statement. But you can directly contribute to a Roth 401k. And I'm pretty certain every person, all your employers on this call, they do allow a Roth 401k option. I would highly encourage or implore you to have, if not all, like some, if not all of your current payroll deductions going into the Roth, at least under our current tax code. And that's true pretty much across the board, no matter what income level you are. And then I have one other one. This will probably be the last question just because we're getting closer to time here. But like I said, if you got other questions, shoot me an email or set up an appointment. Is there any way to influence our predictable income, or do we need to focus on aligning our necessary expenses to meet them? Yeah, so when it comes to the predictable income, and this is a great question, there are ways to influence it. So, let me actually just go back to them so you guys can see them too. Yeah, so our predictable income column here is this blue. So we've got Social Security, pension, and income annuity. So Social Security, I actually give a whole presentation on it. I'm pretty sure that one's recorded too. So if you want the Social Security presentation, shoot me an email. That one was, I think I had over 100 people come to that one. It was the most popular one we've done because it's very ambiguous. But Social Security, you can control the amount that you're getting because the way that it works in a nutshell is that you can claim Social Security from 62 all the way to 70. And every year you defer it, the number goes up. So it goes up and up and up and up. So it's kind of a game that you have to play when you're putting together your retirement plan, especially if you have a spouse, because not only are you making the decision short term, but also too, typically it's a reality that one individual outlives the other person. Okay. So you're also creating a plan for maximizing the survivor's Social Security too. And then the Roth stuff comes into bigger play because Social Security by itself is actually not taxable. It becomes taxable when there's other income hitting a tax return, such as distributions from a 401k. However, distributions from a Roth 401k or IRA are not taxable, so they don't make Social Security taxable. So I've got clients right now who are happily retired, then they're never going to need to pay taxes again because all of their money is coming out of Roths to supplement above and beyond their Social Security, and that doesn't make their Social Security taxable. So it's huge. Another one too is the income annuities. So income annuities, you can take a chunk out of your your income from assets portion to create the income annuity. So when you're looking at it and you're creating a retirement income strategy here, is saying, okay, well, hey, my necessary expenses, kind of going back to your question, hey, can we control our predictable income, or do we have to only focus on controlling necessary expenses? You can control your predictable income by saying, hey, I want it to be this much. So say you needed $10,000 a month in income. Well, we would just look and say, hey, okay, well, your age is this. If we need $10,000, well, we're going to knock off your Social Security, or we're going to claim it here, and then say, well, okay, now we'll look at this income annuity based on your age. If we want to fill that gap, well, we need to put whatever the dollar amount is. I'll make one up, but $150,000 into the income annuity, and then bang, that's taken care of. And then we just work with the orange from the ladder. But I could talk about retirement income planning forever. I'm a nerd. So, and then this will be the last question, but I think it's good for everybody because it's very applicable. Are these slides available after the meetings? Yeah, they can be. This is all client approved. So yeah, after I do all these meetings too, I always shoot out, or I have my team shoot out within a day or two of the event, recording of everything that we did today. I'm surprised I never did do that before. I'll include the presentation on it too, just so you can page through it at your own leisure. And usually there's like one or two little supplemental attachments that we send out to folks. Like it'll be like this as a standalone piece or something like that. But I know we're hitting time here, so I'm gonna hop off. Like I said, you all should get a recording, and I'll make sure to include like a PDF of the slides or something like that, just so you have it for your own resource. But thank you all so much for attending today's. Keep an eye out for next month's. We do one of these every single month. They are recorded too, so like I said, if you can't make it live, feel free to just sign up, because then you get put on a list of people that do receive the recording. And like I said, take advantage of the quick 15 check-in with me and or my teammates. We have a lot of really good conversations from those, and hey, it doesn't cost you anything. So, all right, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful day. Hopefully we've got spring right around the corner here. So take care. Thank you again. Bye.